Okay, so team, we have few announcements to make. Like if your certification is getting expired or if you want to get recertified, so now you have the option like extend. You can extend your certification status for another next 2 years. So it is available for a MUL certified developer and the MUL certified platform architect and MUL MCIA as well. So please go ahead and get certified, recertified again. So it's going to extend your validity, and there are certain codes available at the checkout, so you can make use of that. For more details, please log on to this https like trainings.mulesoft.com certification maintenance. You can say this, and also we have a MuleSoft Connect 2021. So you can log into this connect.mulesoft.com and block your slot. And once the meetup is done, or whenever you're posting any technical content about MuleSoft, please don't forget to tag us in LinkedIn so that it reaches more people. So that's a kind of a request from all of us as a team. And at the end of this meetup, we're going to have a trivia challenge. As always, most of the virtual meetups these days having this trivia challenge. So out of the participants, all three winners are going to get a instructor-led training classes for free. We're going to give you the instructor-led training. You can choose the training whichever you would like to attend, and it will give you a free certification voucher as well. So that is it from my end. I'll hand over it back to Akshita for her topics.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. Thank you all for joining.
Yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, it's loading, Akshita.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then today we'll be discussing mainly about the API security, and then in the second part, we'll be moving ahead with the enterprise integration patterns. So security basically, I mean, about API. So it's a big, I mean, it's a vast topic. So I just wanted to know from you guys as well, like what are you guys aware about when it comes to security? So anyone would like to answer? I mean, basically about the API security. Has anyone worked on it, or what things are you aware about?
Yeah, basically we are protecting our APIs.
Yeah,
So either from the, I mean, authorized persons or restricting the even authorized persons also.
yeah,
Like
that's true.
we have set of API rules
Yeah.
that in API manager we can set it.
Basic Spring security.
Yeah, we do. We also have Spring Security. So, in simple basic term, API security is securing all your API. Securing from what? Securing from the malicious attempts, the attackers and all who are trying to steal the data, who's trying to like access your APIs or harness the power of your APIs. So, yeah, I mean, this is what basically an API security is, right? Protecting your APIs. We have been working in a world like we have been creating an integration application network basically where there are like so many end systems and all involved. So it's not just limited to a public private organization, it's also extended to a public organization if you'll see. I mean the government, public organizations, even they have been using APIs. For a simple example, you can take a COVID vaccination thing. So all those things we are able to book our slots and all from a mobile, right? The vaccination slots. So for all this thing also back of this entire process, the APIs and all are being used. So if these APIs are used to such an extent, like at the government level or at the organization level, public level basically, so the chances of threats, I mean the security threats, they increases, right? The malicious attempts are more likely to happen. So at such level, how will you secure your API? I mean, we know the need, right? First, why to secure your APIs? Basically, the information is critical. We don't want to lose our data. We don't want someone else to attack, like add something, like the different kinds of attacks and all which happens and all, right? So we don't want all those things and all. So I mean, basically the attacks. So to avoid them, we need to secure our APIs. So, apart from like before moving on to this technical things, like what all security attacks and all are you aware about and how we can protect them? What are your views? Can anyone come up? Let's have a normal conversation rather than being a very serious meetup because that would be like very boring. If we are making it interactive, it would be like better for us. Yeah, right. Denial of service attack, man in the middle attack. What all different things are you guys aware about? Yeah, sniffing and all, brute force. That's right. You all can unmute yourself and speak up as well. That's completely
Yeah.
fine. I would love to hear your voice. So, yeah, there are different kinds of attacks, right? And what are the major security concerns? So, security concerns apart from this attack, like there could be the attack is something like which happens from an external entity. But what if we internally like we are having a fault? Like if there is some security misconfiguration, or if there is a mass assignment, like at a server side, we are able to like someone is able to change the like this thing payloads and all and accept the server side data something, or if we are injecting the data, injecting something, some tokens or something, some false information and trying to access the data, or there is not a proper asset management. Like if suppose if we are having different environments like staging, dev environment, production environment, so someone is trying to steal, I mean, if your production environment is very much secured, but your staging environments like the dev, QA, all these things, if they aren't secured, then the hackers can, I mean, actually get access to them easily, and using them they can predict something for the production environment, or maybe they gain some knowledge or some access about the system and the production, how it is like going to happen. Okay, so even such we are not just relying only on the attacks which are like caused by the attackers, I mean the proper hackers, but there could be some fault and some mismanagement or some security things which could be left incomplete on our part as well. So we need to manage those things as well, right? So the next would be like lack of resources, rate limiting, broken function level authorization. I mean, all these PPTs and all will be available to you all after the session. So for now, let's mainly go on into the discussion part because PPTs anyways you all can read it. And this is a very generic or very basic information. Apart from this, do you think like do you identify any other security concerns apart from what we have mentioned over here? Anything you would like to bring up? Which what you think could be a security concern? Yes, Ravi?
Yeah, we can provide the flexibility to deploy the application by providing the securities.
Yeah, that is the role-based access. We should be like, not everyone should be allowed to deploy the application, or not everyone should be allowed to get the access, right, to the critical informations or critical passwords. Only the top management or the someone who's like reliable, only they should be having those kind of access. So that could be under role-based categorization. Yeah, anything
And we
else?
can avoid the numerous candidates like who are trying to the proper things. We have a certain format. They have to misleading and numerous candidates will we need to avoid them by using securities to access the data.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Anyone else would like to go?
Encrypting passwords.
Yeah, encryption and all needs to be taken care of. Like whatever properties we are setting. Also, while developing a mobile application, we need to ensure that the properties, I mean, they aren't hard coded, any of the values. We are just encrypting them using either you can use the encryption module, or you can secure the properties using a YAML file, or maybe configuration of those properties, algorithms and all which MuleSoft provides. So that's a separate topic, like securing your properties and all. But yeah, that's a really a valid point. Anything else? These are the these are the remedies we're talking about. What are the security concern? What are the threats to our APIs? How can we protect our APIs? That will be a second part. But what are the threats basically you can identify? Anything else from anyone? Okay. So I think yes. Sorry, Ravi. So
The
these are the
security, like when you have to react to it, any program you can easily do that.
okay. Your voice is not audible, but yeah, you can maybe type in the chat section.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's not clear very much. So basically, these are the attacks which we are talking about: the injection attack, the DDoS, denial of service attack, the man in the middle attack, authentication, hijacking, and all. So yeah, there are several things when once your API is public, or maybe it's a you can secure your APIs with like VPC and all those things. But yeah, once it is available, it's production. There are different kinds of threats we need to take care of our APIs, and it also depends on what type of environment it is. Okay, the deployment environment as well as, I mean, for if it is an on-premise system, the security team, I mean, you will be having your own infrastructure, your own security and everything. But if it is a cloud hub, we'll have to be relying on the MuleSoft. We can also add your own security things. But yeah, and even in case of RT, the security configurations and everything is different. So it depends. But the underlying architecture, like these are the attacks which we have, and this is how we have to protect our APIs. Even the Gartner said, right? I mean, by 2022, API attacks would be like the most frequent vectors resulting in data breaches. I mean, those will be the most frequent attacks which will be occurring. And we have also been seeing these attacks recently whenever we see in the news, right? That our servers has been down, something has been hacked, and all these things. So what security policies or what MuleSoft is providing for this kind of so this is the architecture which MuleSoft is providing. Okay, so this is our API gateway, which we'll be building. I mean, which we'll be creating our own asset for the developer. I mean, for the end systems. Okay. In our API, using our API manager. So govern, enforce in the sense we'll be like governing the security policies which we have or any security mechanism which we have over here. And these are the different clients who will be accessing your API via a basic endpoint. Or over here, it could also be a proxy endpoint which you are using. Okay, and then this is the backend implementation. So API gateway, it actually acts as a, like you can say it's a gatekeeper. Before entering a building, you need to actually show your ID card to the watchman, if it is an organization, of course, and then you will be validated and then you will be going. So that's what is an authentication. So MuleSoft actually suggests you to provide different kind of layered security to different layer. If it is a peripheral layer, I mean, so suppose if we are building actually an application network wherein there would be like different application which are interconnected, and MuleSoft is going to pass through systems, I mean the request and all. It will be a middleware kind of thing, and there are different, like if you can imagine the API-led connectivity, the API-led architecture. So at different peripheries of different end systems, we need to be taking care of this API security, and this is what it is called as the API, the layered security which is provided by MuleSoft. But when we come under, like I mean, when we just come to the smaller scale, like at an application level. So this is how basically it looks like. We'll be having a client, these are the client, like maybe you can say in our developers case it could be a postman from where we are requesting a basic endpoint. We're just trying to make a get or post or a delete call, whatever it is, to an API. So before entering our API, it will be like before actually accessing the resources at the database side or maybe at the server side, first the layer which is the security layer or the watchman layer which we can say is the API gateway. Okay, which will be actually doing like, which will be validating if your request is valid or not. It will be like make it will be protecting your base services or the backend API, the implementation layer, from the kinds of threat. And this is the layer which we'll be discussing the most about today. More about the policies, what all things we can be implemented, and what all security measures we can take into consideration. Any doubts until you?
Yeah, hi Akshita. So
Hi.
basically, when you're saying Postman is the basic endpoint,
Hmm.
does that mean that whenever we're calling an API, do we have to provide the security, whatever the security, be the token, RSA token or something like that?
No,
If
it
it
is
is there,
not compulsory. I mean, if you're doing some testing in dev environment or something like that, and even in production, it is, I mean, it completely depends on what your client is suggesting. If the project is, if the application is really very much critical, if they need that kind of security, it is always advisable to secure your application, but that is not compulsory, right? I mean, not every offices will ask you an ID card. Some will like just let you know, just let you walk in. Some might meet in cafe as well, which is like a very casual way. So it all depends. But suppose if we are working in some bank or something like that, a financial project, if you'll take into consideration, the kind of security they have, it's like immense. I mean, they won't even let you to take your laptops home or something like that because that's the environment in which they want the resources to be, in that framework, in that limit only. They don't want their resources to be exposed or any data to be exposed outside from any private network. They want everything to be taken care, inside their premises. So that's the kind of security things. But yeah, it's not compulsory to apply this thing when you're hitting from a postman. Suppose if I want to hit the simple endpoint, right? I'll just simply hit it. There is no security and all over here. But if I want to apply any security, I can select it out from here. I'll have to firstly apply it. So in that case, what will happen? This request will first go to my, before reaching this end system, before calling this flight's data, okay, this application, it will first have to validate itself at the API gateway level. That's what we are going to build now. Let me open. So most of you are familiar, this is the Anypoint platform. Okay. Inside this we'll be going into the API manager. So this is the place where we actually manage all the things related to API or the policies or basically everything. So to manage an API, you need to create an API asset first. So you can, if suppose if you're initially having your APIs or any RAML or anything, I mean your APIs if you basically publish to Exchange, so you can directly pull it from there, or you can like create a new API, or if there is any proxy application, you can import it as a zip file and all. Okay, so I'll just show you, like this is how we create an asset. Let me show something, demo policy. Yeah, I mean, it's already been created. That's why yeah, see, this is everything has been popped up by itself. I just entered the policy name, the RAML type. You can also have a WSDL in case of SOAP or an HTTP, a simple asset. Okay, the asset versions, if it is a mule based, mule 4, if you're using, you'll have to select this if there is some implementation URL and all, and save it. That's it. And then after that, you will be having something like this, a demo policy, an asset which has been created. Okay. So once you go into this, this is how the dashboard looks like, from where you can actually manage all your implementations, all your policy related thing. So what happens? See, I'll show you. This is the runtime manager. Just a minute, where you deployed your application. So between your application, I mean, suppose if you're having just one application deployed, but what if you're having hundreds of applications? So how are you going to manage this security for all these applications? That's not possible, right? That's will be like, so you need something like under one roof to manage all your policies and everything. So in that case, what we have is we have this API managers. So suppose this is only for one single application, but if you're having hundreds of application, all will be listed down over here. You can also create an API group to manage it at the SLA level or something like that. That is something newly introduced. Okay, so now let's go into this. We'll be mainly focusing on the policy level because that's where the security things comes into picture. For now, just understand that this is an API gateway or an yeah dashboard for managing the API. All the information related to API will be displayed here. The number of requests and all. Whenever there are policy violation, if you want to do a check, how many times the policy has been violated, uh, and everything. Yeah, it's visible here. So apart from this, yeah, these are the some everything related to policies. So which all security policies are you aware about before moving into the mule policies? Any policies which you have applied or you are aware about already? Yes, OAuth and
We are using client ID enforcement.
oh, that's nice. Anything else? Basic authentication,
Yeah, JWT token.
durability token, wow. Throttling, rate limiting. Okay. Anything else? Anyone? Also, these are the, I mean, we'll be coming to the types and all. So these are some, okay, let's, someone else is answering as well. Okay, SLA, IP level. Okay, at IP level, you're doing IP whitelisting, blacklisting, something like that, Vishnu? Okay, that's nice. Okay, so when it comes to policy, we can go on to the policy section, and MuleSoft has provided you some amazing out-of-the-box policies. Okay, and just these are called the automated policies as well. All you need to do is just go and just have to like configure them, and they will be applied to your application. So whenever you apply a policy, whatever it is, so you will be seeing the status in the runtime manager of your application as well. Okay, so these are a few policies. We'll be talking about all of them now. I mean, in brief, obviously. So when it comes to client ID enforcement, so yeah, before that, there are also different categories if you'll see. There are security, quality of services, troubleshooting, transformation, compliance, and all. And make sure you all are like being very attentive because there are very much like there are questions which I'll be going to ask in the trivia quiz, which will also lead you to a free workshop. I mean, a free training session by MuleSoft, of course. So, yeah, be attentive. So, whenever you're trying to go for a policy, right? So, there are different categories of policy, and certain different policies falls under a different category. For example, a client ID enforcement, it would fall under this thing, compliance level, okay? Or an IP, HTTP caching, or maybe header injection and header removal. These are something of the transformation policy. We will also discuss like what are these policies. So, when it comes to client ID enforcement, okay, so you are applying a client ID, client secret. So those are the two parameters. Like I cannot go into depth of everything because that is like a compliance thing. So before hitting the API, you actually need to go and configure it over here. Um, Over here, okay, in the authorize in the header section, maybe writing the client ID. You need to pass it as client ID and then a client secret. Okay. Client secret, and this is how your API will be. And this client ID, client secret, it will be different for different environments like dev, test, and all whatever you're having. So this is how you're like configuring it, like credentials origin. From where do you want the client IDs to be configured? Do you want it as like HTTP basic authentication header? Like, do you want to pass it with your headers, or you want to pass send it as some custom expression? Like you can also send it something like attributes at headers at client ID, or you can give it some other name, client number, or something like that, and pass it in the header. If there is something different you want, you can make it customizable as well. But normally we keep it as this thing. Apart from this, for all the policies which we have seen, right? I mean, all the automated policies, we have these things. I mean, we can configure it at the resource level also. We can apply this policy for a particular resource, not necessarily for all. If you want to apply for all the API methods and resources, like suppose in a YAML or in an API, you are having different these things, different methods, get, post, put, delete, everything. You want to apply it for all of them, then that's fine. You can go ahead and apply for all of them. Or if you want to select for a particular method, you can do that as well. Like you can select a get method and then you can select a URI regex pattern. So if I want to apply for all get method, I will do like dot star. Okay, if I want to do it for a particular end system, suppose my end system is like person and then some number, something like this. This is the URI pattern. I can also see the preview matching and all. And this feature is available for all the across all the policies. So all policies can be configurable at the resource level or maybe at the with the help of this URI regex template. So this is about the client ID enforcement. The second one being the cross origin sharing policy. So this is also known as the course.
Archana,
Yes, sorry.
so basically, for client ID enforcement, if I want to trigger a particular environment code, I have to go to the client ID enforcement. For example, dev to do something or something.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean that is not compulsory, but yes, you can apply that policy as well. And before applying all this policy, make sure that you are creating this asset. I mean that you will have to create, and you have to link your account. I mean you have to link this API auto discovery with your application. I hope I'm not sure like in your global properties, right, of the Mule Studio, you can. I hope you're aware about this API auto discovery, or I'm just sending you out this term. If you're completely new, maybe you all can just read it out later. So this is something this is the ID which binds your application, the API manager with the with your applications which is deployed over here. So you could be having this application, right? Okay, let me go to the logs section. It is deployed in the runtime manager. And here, if you can see, if I'm applying this auto Yeah, if you can see this ID, auto discovery ID, it has been linked to my application. So this is the same 1675. It is the same ID which I can find it over here as well. So this is how the my application gets to know that this is the policy which we have to like this is how the balance is. Okay. So moving on to the next policies is the CORS one, which we seen. So the cross origin policy. So suppose if your application is coming straight away from single user, if I'm the user, I'm sending a request to my endpoint, but that is fine. It should allow it. But if suppose there is a hacker and if he's using proxy application, if he's making multiple hops and then reaching my application, so in that case the details won't be available. Or if my application is running on different machines and all. Uh, I mean, if the end systems are coming from different machine which is not allowed, or if the domain is not supported, in that case, I need to be using cross-origin resource sharing, to which all resources basically I'm sharing this policy. Then there is tokenization and detokenization. So these are the basically the masking policies. You can say if you have some critical information which is coming along with your payload, but you don't want this data to be like available freely, you want it to be masked as something. So masking in the sense you can either change the numbers. I mean, suppose if I'm getting entering some credit card details and all, or something like account number, some PI information. Okay, so in that case, it can be easily masked with the help of tokenization, which is over here. And if you want to detokenize it, something if it is coming as a form of token, you can detokenize it as well. Okay, I don't have permission to this policy as a user. Okay, but this is what a tokenization and detokenization mean. Apart from this, under security policies, we have list OAuth and JWT. This comes under security. Okay, so OAuth is a very famous, I mean, you can apply OAuth use with the help of any, it's an authorization policy basically. It authorizes you. It's different from like what authentication is. I hope everyone is aware about like what authentication and authorization is the differences. So OAuth is the authorization policy, but along with authorization, you need something to authenticate as well, right? So you can be either using something like OpenIDC or maybe client ID secret, the basic authentication, or something like that as an authentication. But this is something the authorization. Can anyone help me with like the difference between the authentication and authorization, if anyone is not aware, or maybe what are the uh, policies which come under authentication and what comes under authorization? Maybe you can just list down that some policy name which comes under authentication and what security policy comes under. Uh, just write the policy name and yeah, okay, basic authentication, right? And then
So,
JW.
so just a point here. So OAuth 3, like I think like whatever the grant that we use, that falls under both authentication and authorization, right? Or is it only authorization?
So OAuth, if you're using with someone else, something else like OAuth with OIDC and all, then it becomes an entire authentication authorization package. But if you're using only OAuth, that will be authorization. If you're using SAML, that comes under both authentication, authorization.
Yeah, basically when we are like validating the username and the
Validating
password.
password, yeah. But
Yeah.
OAuth, what happens is like with the OAuth 2.0, earlier we had only 1.0, now we are having 2.0 as well.
Mhm.
So, so yeah, sorry. So you're having like both of them, right? I mean, to identify. Even in case of JWT, currently in my application, my client's project, I'm using only JWT token to authorize it. It's in the form of token. But along with that, I'm
Mhm.
supporting like with the basic authentication, which provides an authentication, and then JWT does a task of authorization.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
So basically,
Sriram,
yeah, it depends on the case. It can be A and A or else only authorization, right? The OAuth one.
Yes, it will be only authorization if it is alone.
Thank you.
Yes, Vasvi.
no, no,
Uh,
I was saying
I have
Sriram Ping.
I have a question. In the client ID enforcement, we are using client ID, client secret, right?
Yeah, right.
So those two things only must require. And if you want to provide a customer customize it, then we need to enter in the policy law. So, but why they have given versions like 1.2, 1. It doesn't all required, right? Not required, right? Why they are mentioning?
The versions like this one.
Yes.
Okay, these are the different enhancements. I mean, the previous version, they have done some fixes to the different policies. You can select either of them, and it is always advisable to select the latest version. After some time, I mean, after few year, maybe a year or something later, they will deprecate these older versions, and it won't be available. So, if you're someone who's currently using this older version, it's always advisable that you move to the latest version because they might be having some security fixes, the patches done.
Yeah, what like the basics? Why and what is the difference level in these things?
Okay,
Like
there is not much difference, maybe some security patches because, but of course, defining the every version they have, they release the document and all as well, from where you can see what is the version, what is the version difference. But normally there is not a major change. There are only enhancements which they do. If
okay,
they find something is like there are some glitches in this policy, they will make some enhancement and they will release a new version, a patched version basically. It's like something we develop a raml, we have some faults and all, and then we go like we do the changes and we publish an X asset to the exchange. So something like that. Okay, so
okay.
this is the OAuth, and then there is header injection removal. The simple basic authentication, which will be having only a client ID secret. HTTP caching, if you want to cache some request, I mean some response. After hitting your API, you're getting the response back. If you want this, HTTP, I mean, if this want the response to be cached, you can use HTTP caching. And then when it comes to HTTP caching, it can also be made persistent in that the object store and all will be used. If you are using on-premise, it will be a different thing. Your data stores will be used. Okay, IP blacklisting, whitelisting. Okay, so in this you can actually blacklist some IPs or whitelist. You can allow some IPs to be used. So that is the difference. JSON thread protection and the XML thread protection. There are two of them. It is for protecting the JSON payload, or if there is an XML payload, which you if you want to protect those payload from the threads, you can go ahead with it. Okay, and this is the basic authentication with LDAP, and then there is a logging policy as well to log your messages. Then there is rate limiting, SLA base, and spike control. So all of this. So can anyone tell me the difference between rate limiting and spike control? You'll find this question asked in majority of the places at the interviews and all these
Spike
things is.
spike control is based on the time limit it allow the request. Once we reach the maximum limit, the next request will be in a queue, right?
Ah, yes, right.
But rate limiting, so when we reach the maximum limit, that it will throw a message like the maximum limit is reached. That message will throw it.
Yes, right. So basically, this client ID, I mean JWT policy, I mean what it is was rate limiting. So rate limiting, it is based. There are two types of rate limiting, right? Normal rate limiting and rate limiting based on the SLA tiers. So in rate limiting, normally if you are allowing only 500 requests per minute. So let me show you because they are actually quite important. Not important. Like normally people do use it. Normally projects use it. So if you'll go inside this, you'll find the identifier, the number of requests in the time period and the time unit. So how many number of requests? Suppose if I'm giving 1,000 requests in a time frame of like 1 minute, okay, time period and time frame I need to give if it is 1 minute, okay, it needs to accept only 1,000 requests. If there is 1,001 request, the first request after 1,000, if it comes, it will be directly rejected. So if your request, if it is not like something carrying crucial information or something like that, then you can go ahead with the rate limiting. Like suppose if you're like while checking the cricket information, I mean the CricBus app we use, or something like checking the weather information, just to refresh the page, right? Or while checking a result, sometimes you'll see like during the board exams and all, the site used to get hanged, and they didn't allow the passengers, or the IRCTC app, they don't allow sometimes after the limit is reached. So that is what rate limiting. Then straight away they decline your request. But suppose if it is a crucial information, a crucial thing, like you cannot afford losing the customer, like if there is an online sale or something like that. So in that case, we go ahead with the spike control. So wherein what happens, it's a similar configuration wise, you can say. Let me show you. So in that, if you're setting a limit of 1,000 requests, and if there is a first request which comes after 1,000, I mean the first one, so what it will do, it will queue it somewhere and it will be processed later. So it's more like a sliding window protocol kind of thing. So only the requests which are not processed will be processed later, and that too after a certain interval of time. And there is also this thing which you can say.
So like
Yes.
what is the number of I mean for queuing, what is the maximum limit?
There is no maximum queue limit as such. I mean, it depends on your queue configuration. Yeah, just a minute. See the the maximum number of concurrent requests you want. It's configurable actually. What number of queues what number you want to be configured, and the maximum time the delay attempts will happen. I mean, suppose if you're trying after some time, and again if the reach again if it has the quota has reached for the 1,000, then after how many times it should attempt again. Uh, I hope you're getting it. I mean, firstly, you will be setting the number of requests those will be allowed. Like, suppose if I'm making a only 1,000 requests will be allowed in the time frame window of like 1 millisecond or something, or 1 second, something like that. Time period window size. Okay, and the delay time after 1,000 millisecond, I mean, if there is any 1,001th request coming. Okay, 1,001. So in that case, it will be tried after 1,000 milliseconds time difference. Okay, and again in that time difference, if there is no bandwidth to attend this request, the 1,001th request, then it will again try it once again. Okay, and the number of requests which will be queued is five. After five, they will also be like they will also be rate limited. I mean, they won't be accepted. So these are the number of requests which we can like concurrently we like they will be waiting out. Okay.
After 5 requests that you set for queue, so do we get message like request was rejected?
Yeah. No, I don't know. No, no, in Spike, sorry, I'm sorry, it's my mistake. In Spike Control, it won't be rejected. It will be like after five requests, it will be trying or something like that. Sorry, Vasavi, you want to go ahead? Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
there's a question in chat window. Like, can you explain where and how message logging will be used and helpful?
Okay. Message logging, it will be normally we have a message logging. I haven't used it anywhere. It falls under the category of logging thing. Let me show you. So if you want to add some messages like the attributes dot headers and ID, like logs the custom messages in between the policies and the flow. Okay. If payload is used as a part of logging policy, it is something basically to add as a messages. I mean, you can log these messages in between the policies and all as well. Like we'll be having multiple policies, right? There won't be a single policy. Suppose if I'm applying, let me show you.
Maybe actually the one classic example would be when you want to log the tokens after you receive before you send it to the applications. Maybe that might be the use
Yeah,
case.
that could be an use case that could be an use case, but normally we do not log our tokens. We
Yeah,
can maybe
absolutely. Yeah,
that is something like not advisable, right?
yeah, I agree. We should not, but yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, token injection. I mean, currently what is happening in my project is like you can say we are injecting this token as a form of headers and all. I mean, we want to use it somewhere else, like as a decryption purpose, so that can be done. But if something, yeah, even a token or some critical information, if you want to log it down, so for that purpose you can use this messaging policy. Okay.
It's more of like a logging information within the
Yeah.
policy range.
You will be having like different kinds of policy stacks applied. Okay, like let me show you. If suppose if I'm applying a header injection policy over here, uh, header injection in the sense, if suppose if I'm applying some token and I can not just give some value. Earlier I thought that we can only apply some specific values to it and add it. Okay, but that's not the case. We can also add some data view expression to the headers as well. And suppose if you want to take something from your, you can actually write the entire data view expression and you can take something from your payload, the payload or the token maybe, whichever previous policy has been applied. So you can do that as well. So suppose if I'm applying header injection and I'm also applying one more policy, which is like the JWT token I can apply, which is over here.
One query here. So it's saying inbound headers and outbound headers.
Yeah, yeah, I'll
Distinguish.
explain that. Yeah, just a minute. So in this header, JWT also like I'm just applying it. I'm keeping the configurations as same. We can come back to it later as well. So in between these two policies, so if you can see, I have applied this two policies. So I can set the execution order as well. Which policy I want to go ahead with it first and which one will be like coming up next, something like that. So first definitely we'll be getting a header injection and then the JWT policy. I mean JWT and then the header injection. If I want to log a message between these two policies, something like that can be happening, and the logs will be seen in between this on the runtime manager, the logs. If you want to add some logging, I mean message logging in between, you can do that as well. But I've never used this logging mechanism, the logging policy. So coming back to the JW, header token, right? Header injection. So okay, I've already applied. Okay, so here what happens? You are saying the inbound header map. So this is something, it will be adding the header in this at the start of your application. I mean at the API kit router level, when your application receives a request, right? At that point the header will be injected. And if you're doing an outbound header map, so this header will be injected in your application once your application, I mean it finishes the processing or something like that. Like this will be in the starting of the flow and this will be at the end of the processing, message processing.
So is it like the headers will be injected in the response?
No, not in the response. I mean, you can access this header as a part of attributes at headers dot whatever the header value you're giving. So suppose if I'm passing the header like this and the value of the token is ABC or something like that. So this header I'm start passing in the beginning, right? So I can access this at my API kit router level or maybe anywhere in the flow. And I can access it as attributes dot headers dot token and my value will be like ABC.
My
And
question was for outbound header map. So
okay.
whatever the header values I'm giving in outbound header, so
Mhm.
they're going to be part of the response.
They will be part of response as well, but they won't be available in the start of the flow. Once your flow,
Yeah.
like everything has finished, even this will be part of your response if you want to print the headers and all. But this will be injected at the starting of your processing.
Okay, okay.
And
But
this,
usually, one question, Akshata. So usually, any headers which we send it over to our request, they will be vanished after the transport barrier, right?
yeah.
So will these headers be available even if you're crossing some transport barrier and
No,
available?
no, they
Okay.
won't be. We need to retain it, or if you're doing something like, yeah, if suppose if there are different calls and all will be made, like SOAP call or something like, if you're calling different end systems, in that case the headers will won't be there. You need to retain them in the form of variable or something like that.
Got it. It's like a normal headers
Normal
what we are
headers, yeah.
receiving. Yeah.
So in my application, like you can say, I'm giving an example. I'm actually passing in this token variables. I'm actually decrypting over here itself, and then I'm passing because the client wants everything to be managed at the API security level. But you can pass some variables, or you can just remove some headers which are coming with the help of header removal policies, just like header injection policies as well.
But
So
we can do all this even from app itself, right?
from app itself, like how? I
I mean,
mean.
removing the headers
Yes, yes,
or
you can remove it.
the
You
head.
can write a custom data weave code and you can like add something or remove something. You can make changes to your header as well.
Yeah, they're just automating the injecting or removing the headers, right?
Yeah, the reason because if it's just one app, maybe you can take it
Yeah,
at the app level. But if you're in your organization, like there are hundreds of APIs and everywhere they want to inject some of the headers, that's when
that
usually the policy can be used, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
but I
true.
think this policy can be applied to single API, right?
Yeah, this can be applied to a single API, but whatever logic you're writing, you can do it the
Okay.
similar level for all the API, or maybe you can create an API group wherein all your policies will be like having similar kind of policies and all applied.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So apart from this, where were we? So yeah, I was talking about the JWT validation policy as well. So yeah, I've already applied this.
Akshata, there's one question. Where can queue message viewed for a spike control policy? Is there any particular location?
No, I'm not sure if there is any particular location where a queued message can be viewed, but it is normally queued. I'm not sure if it is accessible as well.
Okay.
Has
Internally,
anyone,
technically.
yeah, has anyone used it or Wasabi you have used it?
No.
Yeah.
We are using custom policies to a max.
Yeah, that is another thing. We'll come we'll come to it as well. Yeah. Um, so yeah, we cannot actually view a queue policy, but if there is something else, maybe I'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'll
Because
make a note.
yeah. So coming to the JWT policy, wherein we can actually create an your own token. So I can give you a short example, like how the token can be created. You can log into this site, jwt.io, and this is how the token format looks like. This is an encoded token. You will be having your headers. You can have your own payload, and this is something JWT, basically the full form is JSON Web Token. So you're having the information like the payload and all, and you can send some more information if you want, whatever it is. You can encrypt it along with the signature. You can have your own 256-bit signature over here. Okay, and then if you'll see this token has been generated, you can use the same token. I mean, this is a static token, but normally what happens is you will be getting a token which your client will be generating, I mean, using the authentication server. Okay, and that will be like dynamic. It will be expiring within like 5 minutes, something like that. And then you can like after a token has been expired, you need to like again generate token to request the API. So within the token time limit, your operation need to be successfully back, else it will be like timed out. So you need to take care of the token expiration time and all as well. So when it comes to signing mechanism, there are RSA, HMAC2 algorithms, and then the signing key length, 256-bit, as we have seen the signature, and then the origin. So currently, as I'm using a static token, right, over here, this is a very static token which I'm having like a static secret key and everything. So in this case, I will be selecting a text. But if there is some other authentication server, a third-party server like Auth0 or Octor and something like that, will generating my token. So in that case, I will be providing the service request to that token. I mean that authentication server basically, which will generate a token for me all the time. Okay. And then if I want to do some client level validation, client ID and client secret, that thing as well can be done. So this is like quite in depth about the JWT token. Apart from this, are there any other policies which we have to cover?
Like, could you please explain with a classic example about governance?
About, sorry?
Govern Governance, like,
Okay,
uh,
API governance basically, right?
yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so API governance is like as we have seen in this diagram, right? Over here. Yeah. So this is what the governance is. There are like different kinds of security layers or policies which you will be enforcing in order to governance is basically like what a current government what it does. I mean it validates or it keeps a hold of your entire API thing. I mean the API manager or the API architecture. So that is like the policy governance which we can say. And there are different mechanism. Policies are just a small part of it, but there are other things as well. You can have your own VPC architecture and all, virtual private cloud, which will be like securing your entire cloud infrastructure. You can create an AWS VPC, or maybe you can be masking. You can be using the encryption module in Mule. Uh, all those things. So there is nothing in particular as such like API governance. All these things like whatever we are discussing. So all these things together they form as an API governance.
If you want to look at about the governance and an API, where we can look into that?
Okay, so that thing you can look into your itself, API manager. So this is the place wherein you actually do the API governance. So this you can see, right? The page, the API, the asset which we have created. So this is the API gateway wherein you can actually do the governance thing. Like what are policies, what contracts you have for API, what alerts are you configuring for your API, all these things.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
Hey
So
Akshata, Akshay here.
yeah, hi.
Could you tell, like what are the type of token like a bearer token? Is there any other types?
Yeah, there is bearer token which I've used. It's also used for JWT. Apart from that, there might be like normal OAuth, something like for OAuth also I've used the bearer token itself. Any other token which anyone else has used? No, I'm not sure about different types of token, but yeah, the bearer token is normally the one or this that is what we pass even in case
Second,
of see.
bearer token, access token, and all stuff as a part of auth, right?
Yeah, that is also part of that is part of auth zero auth,
Yep.
and also JWT also we use the same. If I want to pass this token, right, this one which we have over here, this one, so I'll be passing it simply like the bearer token. and that
I think we have to pass bearer tag before that token, right? I
no, for
saw.
this normally like when I'm using JWT, I pass it like this only. We don't we when we write it over here, right, from headers. So at that time we added over here like authorization. At
Okay.
So
that time we
Postman
need
will generate that. Postman will generate for
Postman
us.
generate that. I mean, but if you're explicitly adding it from here, like if you're typing here as authorization, then you'll have to write over here as bearer token. You have to specify that it is a bearer token. But if you're doing it from here itself, then it's already mentioned that it's bearer. You don't have to write anything. This should be
Yeah.
fine.
When we do it from the code, we have to add that. From Postman, it
Yeah.
automatically.
So these are the out of box policies which you have seen. But apart from this, there are like the custom policies as well, as like Wasabi mentioned. So suppose if there are like different kind of what we can say requirements, like yeah, I'm having this JWT validation policy which will do the authorization thing for me. But if there are some different requirements, like my client wants something else to be added or something else to be saved over here. So suppose if my if I want to inject something or add something or do some processing with the data which is there, so a lot suppose if you're like neglecting like if let's imagine that there is no header injection policy and I want to do something else with the data which I'm getting with the help of JWT token. So in that case what I can do, I can just create my own custom policy, okay, and I can just upload this custom policy and like deploy it over here, deploy in my like publish to my exchange and then pull it in my anypoint manager. So if there are some different security needs which your organization has, in that case you can write your own policy. Okay, apart from the basic one which are provided by MuleSoft. So that is basically a custom policy. It's very easy to make a custom policy, nothing much in it. I mean, you just have to write a command which is like a Maven archetype and all those details. And then you can create a policy. You can also publish it. You can write the code and everything, the logic in the Mule Studio itself. Any point studio. Anything you would like to add, Vasavi, on this custom policy part?
No, it's like more of, I mean, you covered most of the points, and it's not that difficult
Hmm.
to create and utilize a custom policy.
But the
Once you
testing
develop it,
become difficult, right? I mean, custom policy, as there are like no connectors, palettes, and everything available, you have to write the things on your own.
right. That would be difficult, but with Mule 4, in my project at least, we have like we can apply the offline policies and give it a try. So it's not necessary like you have to deploy your application to Cloud Hub or then apply the policy or API manager and then test it. It is not like that. So the custom policies can be applied even offline,
Okay.
and you can test it through your regular local environment as well.
Oh, that's nice. Earlier it wasn't the same, right? We had to deploy
Right.
and then we had to test it, so it was quite an hectic task.
Right. The Mule 3, even the creation was part of difficulty, but in Mule 4, it's been easier. And the testing is also quite easy when compared to Mule 3.
Okay, that's nice. So, yeah, let us come back to the PPT part. So these are the things which we have talked about, the custom policy, the policy categories. There is one more thing which is missing over here, which is the logging mechanism. Let me check what is the one more level. Categories, security, quality of service, troubleshooting. Yeah, troubleshooting is the one for which we have the message logging policy. So yeah, there are five security policy categories basically. Okay, and the policy level, the resource level policy. If you want to apply a policy to a particular resource level, which we have seen is available for all of them. Okay, and what are the policy types? So these are like the custom default policy types. Then there is automated policy, custom policy, online, offline custom policies, which Vasavi talked about. We can do an offline custom policy as well, like on the Mule Studio itself, we can test it out. And then these are the same, the extensions are basically the custom policies. And automated policy are the extension of default policies, we can say. So for automated policies, we need like more admin level access. So if you have seen over here JWT tokenization and I mean not tokenization, there was one policy which I wasn't able to apply. It was given like admin, you need permissions to apply this tokenization and all. So that is something like the automated policy for which we need more access to. Okay. Yeah, these are the basic descriptions about the policies, what each and every policy does. basic authentication using LDAP simple, course policy tokenization, header injection. You all can go through the PPT anytime, and everything is like available on MuleSoft as well, like proper documentation, several blogs and all of that. And Mule Docs are the best place to like read about any policy or anything. If you'll want to work on some of the policy, right, everything will be there in the form of documentation. JWT Mule. So you can actually come over here and you can read about each and everything, like what all fields are involved and how do you need to configure. Also, if you want to like what all things will you specify, the examples and all. So just refer these things and you should be like good to go ahead with it. Okay. Where was I? Yeah. So yeah, these are the different policies and all. Okay. So coming to the endpoint security. So this is something new. Has anyone like heard of it? And what all things we have covered in the endpoint security? Anyone any idea? Okay. So endpoint security is something like and like it is applicable only for the runtime fabric we can say, and it has this three major three major components like tokenization, the edge security, and there is one more security manager. Secure manager, yeah, something like that. So there are three components to it: tokenization, this is edge security, and the security manager, which is over here. I can show you. So these are only specific towards the runtime fabric. If you are someone who's using a runtime fabric, okay, in that case, any point security will be coming into picture. Let me show you. Meanwhile, I can also show you secrets manager, sorry, not security manager. So if you're having the access to the runtime fabric, you will be having one more tab over here. This is my free trial account, so I don't have access. There will be a security manager section over here, which will be having the edge policies and the other thing which I mentioned, the tokenization. So now you will say like even I was having this confusion, which was recently cleared. Tokenization policy, which is included. Okay, let me come here. Hmm. So if you'll see, these are the three services over here. Anypoint security, inside this there are edge policies, tokenization, and the secret manager. So how is it different? How this tokenization is different from what tokenization we have discussed at the policy level? Any idea, anyone? Like here also we have this tokenization and we have applied this tokenization policy over here as well at the API manager level.
No idea for me.
Okay, so this, as I said, this is applicable for the entire runtime fabric, right? And it's like for an environment. And when we come to runtime fabric, there is an ingress level gatekeeper, which like it applies to all the environment, and then it will read out your traffic to your internal policies. So these the tokenization policy which we have discussed in this API manager. Okay, that is for an individual application or an endpoint or an asset maybe. But that these tokenization, these are for entire at a high level, maybe security level. And what comes under this tokenization is the mostly the PII information. If you're having something like credit card information or something very crucial, so you want to pass it as a token. So there are default things which are already embedded in this. I mean, all you have to go and just configure it. I mean, the patterns and all, right? What we have, like for credit card or some different groups, maybe we can show you. Tokenization formats, what we call. So credit card formats and all, they are already like provided by MuleSoft. All you just need to see the end prefix, the start prefix, and credit card format details and all. So this comes along with runtime fabric basically. This is something new. So this is Anypoint security thing which is introduced by MuleSoft. And then there are edge policies, which are almost similar to what policies we have discussed. IP whitelisting, denial of service, HTTP limits, web application firewall policy. This is also called as WAF policy. Uh, these are for the part of Anypoint security groups. You can also configure them if you would be having uh, one more additional subscription for the runtime fabric, and then you can see a tag over here like Anypoint security, the security manager, something like that. If you'll see over here how to create a tokenization or how to apply these policies, no, they'll just show you like go to this. Yeah. go to this anypoint security, and then you'll be going to security policies. So for now, let's not focus more on this, as it is more like towards the runtime fabric only. So these are the edge policies, the tokenization, and the secret manager. Yeah, secret manager is one thing which is available for all of us, like for runtime fabric as well as the cloud app. So in this, what we do, we create a secret group, and in the secret group, we can store trust store, key store, your certificates, and it can be shared. This is a secure place to store all your information.
How can we, I mean, use this, Akshita? Let's say once we
Hmm.
configure the key store or trust store, like how we can use it?
You can actually, I mean, I have never basically used, I never had access to Secret Manager or something, but there must be
Okay.
some steps. You can actually like call it from your like configuring, like while you're configuring the request component, right? So that's where we need the certificates and all when we're using
Right. Right.
HTTP S and all. So, so secret group has been created, so we can add something in this key store,
Maybe
and
it,
then
it
yeah.
seems like we have to upload a certificate and then store
Yes,
the details, right?
we'll have to upload the certificate, the files and all, and then we'll have to call it. But how to access it, that I'm not sure. Is there anyone who has actually used this secure secrets manager?
In
No,
the same case,
yeah,
Akshata, nobody will have access.
nobody will
We
have
have,
access.
I heard this is the first time I heard about that. And
Yeah,
if you have an example, please share it.
definitely. I will.
Good, we learn one thing then.
Yeah,
Yeah, we use RTF,
yeah,
but we never use secret manager.
yeah.
So, but
Maybe we can
we
see
check in
something
the
over here
ingress.
if you're able. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
ingress is the one, right? You'd like to
yeah,
add
we
something
ingress.
to it?
Nothing much. Basically, we just check in the ingress every time. So it applies at the load balancer level, basically. So the security applies at load
Okay.
balancer level. So that
So is it like instead of storing the certs at application level, you would be storing at the
yes,
entire Cloud Hub level
yeah,
and
yeah,
validating?
correct. Yeah, that's true. But
Okay.
we maintain the certificates at application level instead of at
Yeah, I mean, even we do maintain at the application level. That's my question to Akshita. I was like, how do we use this secret manager?
Yeah, see, they have just given like how can we save it, how can we add a secret and all, but how do we access the secret that they haven't?
Maybe, yeah,
Maybe there must be
we
some
can touch
ways.
base.
Yeah,
Akshita, previously you were telling about the applying the policies in the API the manager, right? So like what difference is this from the Anypoint security? I mean, like if
yeah,
you're
and Anypoint security is only for RTF, and it's like for the entire, like as we said, right, the ingress level thing. So it is like for at a higher picture, we can say it's for the entire RTF or the entire environment basically, and the policies which we are applying at the API manager level, that is for a particular endpoint or a particular application pointing to. It's at a higher lower level, maybe you can say at the inside level. First it will be doing the API security check, which is a higher level check, that will be the first gatekeeper, and then it will be moving to the inside, I mean the API security, I mean the API policy at the API manager level, API gateway level.
So if you're on-prem or something, maybe you can treat it like the policies which are in API manager can be applied at API level, whereas
Yes,
in this
see,
security
this
manager, it's
is
throughout the server level.
throughout the server. So if you can see, this is the runtime fabric. This is the anypoint security, which is at the periphery level. Okay, inside this, once you clear out this check mark, so after that you will be coming to the Mule API gateway, which are the policies which we have seen, the out of box policies and all. Okay, yeah. So this was like these are the core capabilities and all, like what we have. We have an HTTP, HTTPS connector, and then the Mule encryption module. There is a cryptography module, the encryption module. Also, we can secure a property files, properties, whatever we are using for data encryption. I mean, for passing any properties, a database property or any server properties, we can store it in the form of property files, encrypted using algorithms, Blowfish, there are AES and all these different kinds of algorithms we have. We can do that. And then what are this integrated in the runtime level. This is more of a theory kind of part which we have already discussed. We have security manager, the digital signature processor, credential vault, uh, vault and all everything. Those are the services currently we don't have, but those are the features which you can access. Okay, so yeah, after this we'll move to the next topic. But any doubts on the security part? Uh, Maybe you all can just type up or you can let me know.
Yeah, we are providing the like header point of view. Header point of view, we are providing the headers, IDs, everything in the endpoint security level, right? At the same time, like client ID enforcements in the endpoint studio level, we can apply there. So, is there any that kind of facility for adding the headers?
No, I mean client ID enforcement we cannot add at the application level. We can add at the this level, platform level only. So there only we are passing the client ID secret and everything. That's it. Or maybe
But
it should allow your API auto discovery. I mean, you should able to test locally properly. That's why we are adding those things in local.
okay, okay,
The username and password which you're saying,
yes,
right?
correct, yes,
Yeah.
correct, correct.
So that is the only thing which we can add. Other than that, we cannot add anything else locally. But if you're doing a local testing inside the Postman as well, I mean, even if this URL is not Cloud Hub URL, if it is a local host URL, you can add the similar parameters. I mean, no, it. I mean, it. If you have those auto discovery and all enabled, you can test it locally as well using those policies. I have never tried though. We normally try it on the Cloud Hub itself, passing it.
Okay,
So yeah, policies can be, this is the only one place wherein you actually configure and you do everything with the policies and all, the API manager, okay, in your dashboard.
okay,
Okay,
clear.
then yeah. So can we move ahead with the next topic? I know everyone has to watch IPL as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next one would be like the enterprise integration pattern. So yeah, what all things do you know about integration patterns? So what all integration patterns have you used before? Anyone?
Yeah,
Publisher subscriber.
like
Okay.
The file based.
asynchronous patterns, request reply patterns.
Yeah, request reply. What mule-based patterns are you guys aware about? What are the mule integration pattern? What are enterprise applications firstly?
Panel
Basically,
planner.
he heard about only publish and subscribe only.
Okay.
The MQ setup. No, other than that, no, we don't know.
So when we come to enterprise integration patterns, there are basically 65 different integration patterns, and there is a book on the enterprise integration pattern which is available. We'll talk about those as well. Meanwhile, like I have some links and all for you from this. If you are downloading the PPTs, you'll be getting those links for the blogs, or I'll also share with you guys. Yeah, you all can just tell me the answers until then.
Yeah, I seen some messages, reliable message
Yeah,
pattern,
Yeah,
relay message,
reliability pattern.
circuit breaker message sequence, content
yeah,
based routing. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I've been stopping you. Yeah, Sriram, please go ahead.
yeah. Our routers in MuleSoft are designed with these integration patterns on the scatter gather or choice router.
Yeah,
Basically, they
that's
have
true.
used
Content
integration
based.
patterns, and yeah,
Okay. So,
Guys, it would be great if you can turn on your mic and speak up.
So Akshata and Vasudha, I'm sure everyone might be from the integration or like integration technology might not be Mule, but we never come across this scenario where someone asking for the integrations pattern, though we have used. So recently I come across ask from the client to list the real-time integrations pattern. So I had to do a lot of work to format it, but yeah, I'm looking forward to what is there in this deck actually, to be honest.
okay. So yeah. So to reveal like these are the top 5 data integration patterns we have coming to Mule. We'll also be discussing the overall enterprise integration pattern. Before moving ahead with it, like there are different, right? Okay. So this we are discussing about the data integration patterns, but there are also enterprise integration patterns. So both of these are like actually different. So you'll get to know that. So have you heard of these patterns? Migration, broadcast, aggregation, bidirectional sync, and the correlation? Because these are the ones which we actually like the MuleSoft tells us about, or the MuleSoft like what we do.
Yeah,
Have
yeah. So
Yeah, but
basically,
Ashok, just a
migration is
question here. Migration, how it can be a data integration pattern? Because migration is something moving the data from one database
one
to another. While
database. Yeah.
so how
So
can it be? Yeah, because I saw the same in the MuleSoft documentation, but I am not really convinced that it is a pattern that we need to consider being an Mule
okay.
resource.
So suppose if you're like that is the very basic pattern we can say. I mean, what migration? Like let's cover up one by one all of them. Maybe we can
So
talk more.
Hi,
So
Akshita.
yeah, hi.
This is Ravi Tamada. Yeah, I think this is a very, very important topic. Many times we are missing it.
Yes.
yeah,
Thank you very much for picking up. I know that if you look at day in, day out, we look at like Vinod.
Yeah.
People are just know that MuleSoft, they know only that drag and drop. They're
Yeah.
really not understanding what is happening because if you look at even earlier MuleSoft, they used to talk about all these patterns.
yeah,
Now they stop talking about even training they
Yes.
used to earlier
Training they
training they
used
used to
to.
talk, but as an integration expert, you should
yes,
know where exactly we are using, right?
yeah, absolutely true. I totally
Really
agree with you,
important
Ravi.
actually.
Because
Thanks
yeah,
for picking up this, Akshita.
Thanks for
We
joining,
should really
Ravi.
talk about
You
what are
can
the
like you can really
implicitly,
help us with your
yeah,
experience
yeah,
if
yeah,
I'm missing out
really,
something.
we should spend some time here and identifying what are the pattern that use and how MuleSoft is internally using it, right? Without using these patterns, we can't call it as MuleSoft as an integration
Integration,
platform.
yeah, that's true.
But people don't know it. When suppose you ask anyone, they don't know about it. But internally, we are doing all this.
All this,
yeah,
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 that's true.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this
yeah.
is
yeah.
the main site actually. If you'll see, this is a very wonderful blog. I'll just forward it to you guys as well, wherein they have actually mentioned about the top 5 integration patterns. So these things, the top 5 integration pattern, we'll be discussing and how like how they are related and everything. But apart from this, like if you'll see, like let me reveal the secret only now. Like let's not create more suspense. So yeah, so this is what I was talking about. These are the enterprise integration patterns. But about these things, normally like we are using this in day-to-day life, but no one is actually like as Ravi said, we are not talking much about it. So if you'll see this point to point and all, or scatter gather routing, all these things, the routing, the scatter gather mechanisms, we are using this, but we are like not much aware about these patterns and all, right? So these are the enterprise integration pattern. They are like 65 in number, as they say, and yeah, we will discuss in depth about them. But let's go line by line as we were like saying about the basic patterns. So coming to the first one, which is like the migration pattern. So as someone said, right, like it is a how can it be considered as a pattern? So basically, like if you're having a data, if your data is something initially it is present somewhere at some place, then it is a stagnant, right? There is no meaning to the data. You need to move your data from one place to another in order to make use of something like it. So that is a basic and a very like a pattern which is like a migration pattern. You're just moving your data or from one place to other. You're processing it. You're actually making some use of the data set. Okay, so this is the scope. I mean, from where your data set, this is the data set A and data set B, and you're actually inserting it in some database or some different end system. So this is a very simple example of migration pattern. So what is actually a migration pattern? It's like a moving specific set of data, sorry, as we said, and it should be able to handle a large volume of data. Even if the volume of data isn't large, if it is small, it's fine. But normally these are like non-transactional, as they are like coming in heap. We're just moving the data from one system to another. Of course, you'll be having all the scopes and everything, and how you're processing it. But this is what's happening. So if you want to back up some database, or if you want to add some node to the cluster, if you want to move it from one system, one instance to another, spinning up a new system. So all these are the examples of migration systems. We have seen the migration in the other form, like migrating from Mule. 3 to mule 4, but that is a different migration. Here we are talking about the data migration, which is like your data, which is the payload or maybe whatever data you're having, that thing you're migrating. Okay. I mean, does it sound like a integration pattern now? Or
Yeah, I think see one of the another example is that see when you want to migrate one data from one system to another system, initially we implement the REST APIs, but most of the system what they do by one step we need to migrate all the data from one stage to another, like source to target, right? That
yes.
we can't use REST APIs. So in that case, we should use this pattern so that move all that using a particular format so that at one stage all this will be moved to target system.
Target
That is
system.
very important pattern.
Yes.
Yeah. So Ravi, maybe something like we develop some new applications to sync up the new database with the existing database. So
Yeah,
that is how.
because already some data will be there in source system,
Source
right?
system, yeah.
How will you migrate? Maybe millions of records is there. So we might have created one AP, few APIs that may do the real time integration. But what happens to the existing data? Who will move it? So customers say, okay, you migrate this. So like Akshita mentioned, by using these rules, we simply move it.
Move it. Yeah, simply move it.
Yep.
It's more like dumping or taking a backup, as they are saying, backing up a data set. We're just having some data which is already lying existing system. We just have to push it somewhere else as a backup or storage, something like that. We're just pushing the data like that. So the next one would be like the broadcast system. Okay, broadcast
Can I
pat.
stop you here, Akshita?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so since we deal with huge data here, so can you talk about how do we handle the errors, or do we take old data at a time? So it takes a lot of memory consumption,
Okay.
right?
Hmm.
So I mean, if you are interested, you can talk.
So
Otherwise,
if we
we are
are
good
saying
to move.
about the used data, in that case, it could be like the batch processing or some kind of mechanism that has been used. And if it is batch, then we already have our own error handling mechanism, right? If there are some failed records, we can process it again or something like that. If it is a normal quantity, we can go for ahead with the for loop and then we can have our own transaction management. But normally they are non-transactional, as they say. It's just a backup data which we are like handling. I'm not sure if there is something else to add in this, like Ravi.
And also many times my understanding is that it's not required even mule to use it, right? See when you see when at a time when you want to move that, sometimes people will use a different. See, we are talking about integration pattern. It doesn't mean that we need to implement in mule, right?
Mule only, right? Yeah.
So it is not one time activity. Why you want to build a one integration? If sometimes based on their some they may write some scripts to move here and there, but it is a just movement of the data.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Ravi, yes, Ravi, you are correct. This is Narsimlu. But the most of the clients is Ravi, what they are talking about the right. If they want to migrate the technology from suppose to taking the data stage, suppose data stage is a ETL tools. They are very good transform the data to one database to another database. But the client they want to migrate with the data stage to MuleSoft. Okay, in that case, we want to support all the data migrations also. So
Hmm.
in my project, I have a lot of use cases like we have to load the full data to from one system to another system, one database to another database. These are the difficulties in facing a mule while processing the huge data.
I
Yeah,
guess Narasimha, that is a problem with everyone.
Yeah, that's the
Oh,
problem actually. That is not suitable for mule. That's what you're talking is correct. Okay, but they are not understanding because mule is like API integration, some routing the messages, taking the request and the API. These things will be fine. But they, when case to real time use cases, they want to stick one technology. They want to all the solutions for in the same technology. Why do you want to go for another tool? That's what they're talking about.
definitely they will say, but I will tell you there is some trick. You tell me if you are selling a product, you will say that we do everything. But you tell
Yeah,
me
that
I will tell
I
you one thing.
understand, Ravi.
guys,
That
sorry to
Yes,
interrupt,
yes.
but
I
keeping
think
time
we
in mind
both
and
have
other
to.
participants,
Yeah, I
will
know that.
keep this discussion in the end of the session
Yeah, right, right.
Sure.
We'll have to
because
talk.
it's a never-ending argument, I know.
Definitely. So moving on to the next, the
Thank
broadcast
you.
pattern. It's like it's also called as a one-to-many sync pattern. Like you're having a data And this is mainly used in case of real-time systems, you can say. So if the time which within you which you want to process the data is less than half an hour, then in that case you go ahead with the broadcast pattern. So suppose what happens, I can give you an example. Like if you are getting some information, okay, it could be like a product management or maybe some online shopping tool, a shopping cart and all. So you have got a inventory in your systems and all. I mean, if something new has been added and you want to other systems to be informed as well at the same time that yeah, I have added these things in my cart, or if some new inventory has added in the stock, that all these things has been updated, then other systems like CRM and all needs to be also updated. So in that case, what we do, we broadcast this information to all the other systems, and that's what is basically what this pattern is. So it's a one-way sync. It's transactional. Okay, I mean, like the way you can take, we are having the scatter gather or something like that. We are passing the information at the same time to all the applications. And also it's like, yeah, you can think of it like a sliding window protocol. So once it has processed this information, so whatever new information is coming, like we can take an example of this inventory thing. So if I'm added some new data, so the data information, I mean, if I'm added some products in it, so all this product information will be synced with the different systems, CRM systems and all these things. And if I'm adding something new product, then only this new information, the delta, will be taken into consideration, not the older ones. So it captures the changes only, and it's more suitable for a real-time application. So that's what it was like. That is it. So the examples they have given is like if you have fulfillment orders which are coming from CRM, online shopping center, okay, if you want to send the notification of your system turbine to like after every 100 milliseconds. And then there is a patient's management system wherein like if suppose a new patient is being added to an emergency room, so if that needs to be informed like in the system as well, the application or something like that. So we are basically broadcasting the information to all the systems. Okay. Anyone wants to add anything on this if anyone is using something like this? I have been using this. I have been broadcasting my information to different databases, but yeah, and that's where we need to take care of the error handling the transactions and all as well. If there is something like the transactional meaning, if something goes wrong while inserting into one database, if I'm having multiple databases to insert or multiple end systems, if something goes wrong, I have to also take care of the rollback mechanism or the rollback flow, that everything has to be reverted. Okay, suppose if I'm inserting, which means I'm using a post operation or an insert operation. If something goes wrong, I have to backfire a delete query as well to take care of the operation to make it neutral. Okay, so the transaction management things is something which we need to take care of. This is all about the broadcast pattern. Okay. And then there is a bidirectional sync. Okay, so what happens in bidirectional sync? You're actually syncing up. It's an act of like, as I say, it's combining different data sets so that both the data sets are in like this sync. So the example which they have given is the order management system. Okay, and suppose like we can see over here, these are the two entities like the Salesforce, and this is some entity. So all these entities, they need to be having their own information. The information should be like exchange, it should be synchronized between both of them. And there could be different entities which are using this information, like me as a user, or there is an admin level, or the example which they have taken here is order management system. Suppose if I'm having an e-commerce website like an Amazon, okay, and if an order has been placed, it has been dispatched, so the delivery boy should be only aware about where the order should be delivered. He shouldn't be aware about what is the cost involved, what is the invoices and all involved. Okay. And apart from this, as a user or as a someone who's customer, I should be aware about like where is my tracking system. I shouldn't be aware about the backend system, like how much inventory is left or something like that. But these information are synced between both the systems. Salesforce, I mean, whatever different systems we are having, each of them will be doing their own tasks significantly, or I mean they will be expert in their own task. Like if I'm having a CRM system, then there is some different databases to take care of my other activities. Okay, so each one of them will be like proficient in their own task, and they will be sharing the information, but at the same time we need to keep sure that there has been like there is not much transparency. There are like role based accesses given, like not everyone is available to use all kind of data. We should be having those kind of access as well. So this is the place wherein we actually be using the bidirectional sync scope. Okay, if you have two or more isolated and independent representation of the same reality, like same reality as in the reality system here is the order management system, but the views are different for me, the views are different for someone else. If I'm an admin, the view will be different for me. If I'm a customer who has ordered some product, so the view will be different for me. If he's a delivery guy, the order will be I mean the view what app he views, it will be different for him, but the entire system will be like in sync. That's what it is called as a bidirectional sync. I hope that was clear. Or any comments on the bidirectional sync and the broadcast? Anyone would like to add? Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, Akshata, you're audible.
Okay.
So PubSub is sort of broadcast, right?
Publisher subscriber. Yeah, you can. I mean, basically, you can say it's broadcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and even our entire API-led architecture. So whatever
Yeah.
we treat with HTTP or HTTPS is bidirectional sync, request reply pattern, right?
See, this is what it comes under the, I mean, we can take up the aggregation first then. So what we are doing in the broadcast, it can be considered as, aggregation is considered as completely opposite of what broadcast is, right? I mean, in broadcast, it is one to many, but from here in aggregation, it's many to one. So if you're like, if you're reversing this thing, so if you're saying, if there are multiple data sets which have been like we are sending the information to multiple systems, that's what is broadcast is. But here we are actually aggregating the data. If you see, if we have the order status and the order history, this is the typical diagram which we have seen in our API led connectivity and all. So this is where we are aggregating our data and all, and yeah, this is the aggregation pattern. So if you are having something like to receive, I'll come back to your question on the queues, the pub sub model as well. We have something like different for it. So, yeah, if we have something like if we are receiving data from multiple systems and inserting into one, okay, like we are doing it over here, we are taking data from like mobile APIs, from the web APIs, we are inserting into one. I mean, from aggregated customer data from here as well and the SAP system. So this is like we're collecting data from multiple places. So a typical and the best example of aggregation would be like generating report. Suppose if I'm having data in silos which are present in different databases. Okay, some are present in like some are legacy systems which are like having old data and I mean too much of data, and then there are databases, there are CRM systems, there are NetSuite and everything. So what I want to this data are lying in silos and I'm not making any use of the data. But we know the data is gold and we need to make use of it. So in order to make use of the data, what I'll do is I'll just integrate all this data with the help of with the help of MuleSoft. Okay, I'll collect the data from different end systems and I will aggregate and send it to the Einstein, maybe Einstein Analytics or maybe Tableau, something like that to generate reports for me to give me proper live dashboard. So this is something I'm actually making use of the data which I'm having from multiple end system, and in this data can be actually useful for my sales team to generate reports to see like which product is gaining importance. I mean, what needs to be done, what changes can be done, all this thing. So rather than data lying in different places like in silos and all, so we can actually make use of the data. So this is the aggregation pattern. Okay, it's like multiple, you're receiving the data from multiple end systems, and you need to make sure that the data is at the time is like it's up to date and it's not replicated. So yeah, creating reports and dashboard is like one example, and then if you're creating orchestration of legacy system, uh, so even that is one of the example. Sorry. Any questions? We'll come back to the queues wala part, the publisher surprise subscriber model. So the correlation was the one which was left. Um, so in correlation, what happens is suppose if you're having multiple entities, okay, and if there is like we have different sets, suppose if there is a Venn diagram and there are different sets and whatever things we are having in common, so we'll be making use of those data. Okay, if there is a bank branch, X and Y, and there is Z, but there is like the customer is having accounts in both the branches, but the bank branch will be like sharing the customer data. I mean, some data from from branch Y and from Y to this thing. So we don't need access to all the information. Or the second example could be like, suppose if you're part of this university I mean, if you are a part of this university, and the university is part of a larger university, but you want to get the result of only your university students. So imagine a university is part of a larger university. The larger university database must be having so much of data, and we don't need the entire data. We just need some part of the data. When getting the data, fetching data is like time consuming, or if that is a costly operation, and we need only the common data. So that is where we need to go ahead with the correlation. But these two systems need to be in sync. There need to be a bidirectional sync as well between the two. So yeah, it identifies the intersection between the two data set, okay, and does a bidirectional synchronization of the data set. So suppose if you're having different groups and data set, but they are having something in common, so that's where you'll go ahead and do this common stuff. You'll just so if you're a university or part of larger university, as I told you, you look only for your reports from your students, okay? Because so imagine fetching a report for the entire larger university, how cumbersome it would be. It would be like like how would you identify and how would you like stack out? So that's where but these two universities, they need to be in sync. Only then you can get the proper data. Okay. So that is a correlation pattern, you can say. When you don't want to like spend more information, like suppose imagine the cost involved in terms of time and the operation, okay, uh, to get the data from the large university, also in terms of resources and all. So you want to save on that part. You just want whatever is relevant to you, so you can go ahead with the correlation. And then the last one, yeah, these are the five data integration patterns basically. Do we have any doubts in this five patterns? Anyone would like to add anything? Ravi's, anything from you or Wasavi?
No. You wanted to discuss anything on the PubSub model?
Yeah, sure. So publisher subscriber model, it's like, yeah, we'll be coming back to it in the next chart. Just a minute.
Oh, okay, okay.
So yeah, these are the integration patterns which I've told you. There are like 65 in number, and these are the different components which are involved. Whenever you're talking about the integration, there is a message, there is a channel, router, translator, and the different endpoints which you're having. So for now, we'll like just take the two endpoints, the application like A and B, and how we'll be passing this patterns. So when it comes to MuleSoft, so MuleSoft has divided this as per a component. Like these are the patterns which we can see we are having it over here in the form of message routing, transformation, and all this pattern. But how MuleSoft uses that, these are the patterns and these are the object we are mapping to. Suppose in case of file transfer, they have given us a file-based connector. Then there is a database connector in case of database transfer. And then there are messaging logging processors and the remote procedure call, which we can say as an API as well, the external API doing the task. So these are in terms of the integration style. Similarly, there are messaging system, there are messaging channels, message constructor, message routing patterns, and transformation patterns, messaging endpoint. And this is the book I was saying about, which actually has all these patterns. And if you're looking out for a deeper study about this, so you can download the PDF. I mean, this book is available on Amazon as well, something around 1,000 or maybe less. Okay, or you can download a e-copy, e-PDF. Even I have the e-PDF. Anyone wants, you can ping me over LinkedIn. I can maybe share with you, or you can also download over web. Okay. So yeah, enterprise integration pattern. This is actually the Bible they say for when it comes to integration patterns. Okay. So we'll see. I mean, all of us, we have mainly used this integration pattern, but we weren't aware like what category it comes under, or what do we like call it as. Like for example, if you're seeing the message routers, so we are already aware about what are the different kinds of message router, the scatter, gather, and all. Then for translator, we have the transform message, the data weave component, the message endpoints, which are the like source components, the destination components, and what all operations are we performing. And then there are pipes and filters. Pipes and filters will be like mainly, I can say about it is like an architecture. Suppose if you are passing a data in the form of sequence, we are not passing entirely as one. Like we have in migration, you will be having an end system, like to end system. You're just migrating from one to end. But in this, you'll be migrating in stages. You'll be having a pipe, a secured thing, and then you'll be putting some, and then you'll be like processing it. And then there are message channels as well, which connects to a different mule processors. Okay. Any doubts as such? I can just go to this site. I can show you guys from here. Yeah. So these are the different integration patterns and all. I can show you about the pipes and filter as well, like how it is, to give you an idea. So this is how it is. If you are processing something in stages, then that is called as a pipe and a filter. This is a processing step, and then it will be a pipe, and then okay. Where is it? Yeah, we have covered about this integration style. Then there will be like the message-based processing. These are the message components which we have used, and then the message channels, which will be like point-to-point channel, then the message bus, guaranteed delivery. This is wherein we come under the reliability pattern. Okay, so we make use of the publisher, subscriber, the queues and all. So what does a reliability pattern do? It's like it ensures that the data will be like, even if it is in a non-transaction or a real-time system you're using, you'll be queuing something, you'll be publishing your data into the queue so that the data isn't lost. So in this case, I can give you an example like if suppose if I'm using a real-time system, okay, if it is a weather app or maybe if it is some kind of shopping website wherein I'm getting and it's a big billion day sale like a Flipkart day, so there will be like so many requests which I'll be receiving and I don't want to lose these customers. So what I will be doing, I'll be like putting the request on the queues, okay, wherein I'll be publishing my things and then later I'll be subscribing it, and I will whenever I get time I will be like consuming it. So basically the data is stored in the queue so that it is not lost. So, yeah, this is the overall like picture about the reliability pattern and how it does. It ensures the guaranteed delivery of your messages. So if it is something like you're very much concerned about the delivery and all these things, if you want the request response, so that is when you should go ahead with the reliability pattern. Okay. Mm, the message constructors, the event messages, the request and the reply pattern, and then the message filters. These are the different kinds of filters, aggregators, and all. The content-based routers, which is like the choice router, the validation module which we have, which will validate the true or false and all. We have a proper validation module, right? And choice router we all have used in Mule. Then there are message routers, dynamic routing. I'll show you that as well. What comes under what? So the validation module, basically example. Let me show you. So yeah, this is how the validation module looks like. Is IP, I mean, is something true or false, then what will be the answer or what the error message will be displayed. So there is a proper validation module we have, or the flow control, the scopes, and all these things. They have just categorized it as a different integration routing patterns basically, and they are the same like what those 65 were mentioned earlier, right? So those 65 only MuleSoft has picked up. Like if you'll see above, they have given the name as well. The Mule supports most of the patterns in the Enterprise Integration Book. This is actually the standard book and written by Gregor and Hop. Which I have seen, right? Black and red book. This is the same one which they are saying also. So if you are interested, you can actually go ahead with all of these patterns and yeah, the polling components, all these things we have actually used. But the only thing was we weren't aware about the terms and technologies, like terminologies, basically what they are being called as. So with this, if you would like to bring up anything else, anything new questions, or you can always go through this. I'll send you this slide, this diagram as well. I mean this.
Completely agree with you, Akshata.
Yeah,
We know we use
we
it on
we
a
use it
regular
on regular
basis,
basis.
but we don't know what the pattern is called as.
Yeah. And these questions these days are being also like asked in the interview. They will be normally asking you what are the data integration patterns, what patterns, what are the scopes, what are the choice router patterns, and all these things. Ravi, would you like to add something else? I mean, or anyone like experienced guys over here? Because I don't have much experience with the pattern, the only theoretical things and whatever I have implemented. But if you would like to add something, that will be really helpful for everyone. Anyone, basically. Hi, Francis. Yeah. Hello.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Akshata, we can hear. Ravi, would you like to add anything?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hi,
this
Francis.
is
Yeah.
an
Hello.
Oh yeah. No,
Hello,
I'm the same
Nelson.
as you. I know
Hi,
from what I've implemented.
hi, Francis.
Yes, Ravi, you can go ahead if you want to add anything.
I think Francis can tell more because
We are not able to hear you, Ravi. Not sure.
see
It's
Francis
very low.
Huh.
all the meetups, so he has more knowledge than all of us.
Yeah.
Francis, please go ahead first.
Francis, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that I only know as much as you what I've implemented. There's a whole load of things that I
Yeah.
still yet to implement. Spike control is next week.
Yeah. Okay, then I guess if there are any questions, you can bring it up. We have experts here, and yeah, we'll be sharing the PPT as well. We are having everything, or any feedback for us to let us know, and what
Yeah,
topics you would.
topic wise, okay, we can understand that, but how we can implement these, the implementing point of view, we
So,
are in a beginning stage. So for how we can approach these things, and we need
yeah,
to.
I mean, that's what happens, even currently, like I'm using the pattern, I will be like, we won't actually name it, like while you're actually working on a project or an implementation, like Mule project and all, they won't be saying you that implement the aggregation pattern or implement correlation pattern. You'll be having the requirement, you'll be going on working, and then you won't even realize that you're actually working on this pattern. So currently I'm working on a bidirectional sync, but I wasn't aware like until I read this pattern that this is like it's you who will relate it to the pattern. We all are aware about these patterns and what scopes and everything, but you won't be like if anyone asks you like what pattern is this, like if anyone will give you an example, like ask you an example, like can you just give me of this pattern and what are the patterns you are aware about, you won't be able to relate this thing unless you are not aware about this part, right?
Yeah, rightly said, Akshita. To add few more points, see, Akshita mentioned one book, right?
Yeah.
But actually, every integration should read that because those books, what are the patterns, what are the patterns,
Ravi, your
so
voice
that
is on and off.
I'm sorry. Actually, I think there is some problem with my internet. But thing
Okay.
is that whatever Akshita mentioned, the book is everyone should read it
Hmm.
because see, as an integration expert, after 3-4 years, we should know what is happening, right? I'll tell you, MuleSoft, if you want to be why it is so successful, the reason is that even they mentioned somewhere saying that they have all the components. By using combination of all that, we can achieve all these patterns. Like suppose if you look at in any project, in my project, client actually see these are the proven patterns, right? So customer never bother about what technology we use it, whether it's Delbumi, MuleSoft or Oracle Fusion, whatever it may be. But design problem is always there, and people has already invented the solutions for that. So why MuleSoft is so successful? Because they have given all the components, and by using all this combination of that, we can achieve it. Sometimes certain components like scatter gather, everything they actually use an internal one pattern. Okay, but it's not like suppose if you open any like yeah, project level, we'll have an enterprise level of improved design patterns. If you look at where we define by using what MuleSoft components, those are based on those approved design patterns we'll implement, we'll provide the solutions. That's all. So by using a single, see maybe using single mule processor and a component, we can't achieve the complete design pattern. Right? That's
Right.
what I told. Like if you look at 2 years back, architectural training, they used to have a lot of slides. They used to talk about all the slides
Patterns.
in detail. Okay, there if you look at those
We are
how
losing.
MuleSoft is implemented it. Okay, it's not like take some time. Well, people who just started with MuleSoft, it's very difficult to talk in a short period. But it's very important. Once you reach 3-4 years experience, you should start looking into these design patterns.
Yeah,
It's up to
definitely.
individuals based on the requirement. We should be in a position to make out which design pattern is the best one to use and to go with. So, with once you decide on the design pattern, the components will be in your hands anyway. So,
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
yeah, Achita, I am also facing same kind like So sometimes, so what kind of, for example, batch processing, scatter gather, VM connector. So in the we are confusing. So what particular? So right now for my work, as per the current scenarios, my TL will suggest me so I can use the particular components for the particular scenario. But for later, how I need to decide, so this is the best for the integration for this connector will be useful. How can we, what is kind of measurements if we
Okay.
give the,
So that basically, as I said, it will come with experience. I mean, once you get hands-on experience over each and every connector and actually you're using it, so you'll know what are the faults involved and which one will give you proper result. Like for example, we have this queues, right? We have VM queues, we have M queues, and all this JMS queues and all. So like you will be like once you get experience on all of them, or maybe by reading the documentation, you should be able to identify like which one will be suiting the most for your requirement. If your requirement is something like if it needs a persistent data or a non-persistent data, so which type of architecture you'll be opting up for.
okay.
So yeah, don't stress much. It will be like just go with the flow. You'll get to know about it.
Yeah, okay.
Guys, let's start with the next. Once, if you all can go on a video, I'll capture a screenshot so where it
Sure.
gets posted. I request you all to turn on the video. Me and Akshita are on video from the first. Hi,
Hi,
Francis. I
Francis.
see you now. Ravi, can you also come on to the video?
I wore the Success Community T-shirt. We didn't get to wear that the other day, right? It
Yeah.
wasn't delivered.
No, no, no. That's why I wore a normal black. I say it did not get yet delivered to me.
Oh,
So
is
to
it?
match, I wore a normal black tee. Okay, thank you guys for turning on your videos. Ravi, I'm holding on for you.
No, I have some problem with my
Network. Okay.
I logged in from my office laptop. I can't.
Okay, cool, cool. No problem.
Just hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, Wasabi left the meeting. Let's wait for her to join. And guys, don't leave. We'll be having a trivia quiz. You never know. You may win and you will
Yes.
get a free.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
You guys hear me now? My mic was off. I don't know from when it was off.
Yeah, actually left the meeting and you rejoined.
Okay. Okay, I'm taking a last pick. Great, Jean. Thank you. Okay, I'll start the Kahoot in a minute. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you for turning on your videos. Okay, let me quickly take you to the Kahoot, not to. I know most of us want to get into some watcher.
And guys, you'll be getting a feedback form as well after this meetup. Maybe you all can leave your feedback there. What topic are expected next time, or how we can improve on the experience perspective.
Choose MQ. That is the best one.
Okay, sure. Vasavi, you can make a note of it.
Yeah, yeah. I already.
Thanks, Shriram.
Yeah, really,
Okay.
it's very work session, and so usually in MuleSoft they give sessions on very primary topics or very very top-notch topics. Okay, but this is like a good and sort of design topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys, I request you to share the same feedback over the feedback form as well. So it will be easy for us to manage it.
Yeah, and that will be helpful for us as well.
Yeah. Please log into kahoot.it on your mobile browsers. And please make sure you log in with your actual name so it will be easy for us to track back and send you the vouchers.
What is the code?
Yeah, once all are
It's a
open.
quiz platform, I mean, you
Yeah.
will be able to
So
answer the quiz and all.
should we install this app?
No, it's just like you can open the URL kahoot.it.
Okay, great. It seems it's
You
asking
can
for
ping
pin.
the URL over
So
here,
you can
maybe
ping the
Yeah.
kahoot.it.
pin.
It's asking for pin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
this
pin
is
is
the
on my screen if you are on the screen. I don't want you to type it into the chat because only the actual participants in the call I would like them to attend.
that's fine.
Muley, can you please change your name? If at all you win, I'll not be able to share you the voucher.
Oh, hi, Ketana.
Hi, Akshita.
She's my colleague.
Oh, hi, Kirtana.
Hi, Vasavi. This is my first meetup actually.
So you should be
Thanks for
sharing the
attending.
feedback with us.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much for attending. I see very new people this meetup. It's great actually.
Actually,
Akshita,
this session.
could you please share your LinkedIn profile? If I have any doubts, we can reach you.
Sure, I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, good thing is this session is organized during IST holiday, right?
Yeah. And
And
there is
daytime.
lockdown as well. People are not going
Yeah.
anywhere during the weekend.
So all these
Most
help.
Yeah, most of the time we plan to work on the weekends. The reason because people will not stuck with their office works and they'll can concentrate on the meetups content.
I could log